us. But to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God. And just recently, I was hit with a ton of bricks and stopped on the section that said, love mercy. It really messed me up. Because as I'm looking at the climate of our times, and many of the efforts and the endeavors to establish true justice, I'm not sure that mercy and loving mercy is operating. You might take an issue with me saying that, but sometimes I act as if I don't know something, so it sends me on a journey to discover. And so I looked up the word mercy in the dictionary. And this is what came out. It said compassion or forgiveness shown towards someone whom it is within one's power to punish or harm. Wow. So mercy really is about knowing that because there has been some kind of injustice, mistreatment, and evil done, I have to operate in this place of compassion toward the person who hurt me or harmed me. Woo, that takes a lot to do. But then I went further and I saw this one word that just stood out as a synonym. And the word was humanity. Mercy, synonym, humanity. Now that's in the dictionary, that's not Bernice. I'm not making this up. You can Google it right now if you want to. So then I went back as a preacher, of course, and I said it again. Do justice, love humanity while doing justice, and walk humbly with your God. Do justice, and at the same time love humanity. Woo! It doesn't say do justice and love friends, allies, supporters. While you should do that, obviously, and that's very easy to do. But it includes even your adversary, your opponents, your antagonists, your oppressors, your contenders, your rivals, your enemies. This is some tough stuff, y'all. So while I'm doing justice, the catalyst in this process is understanding that this individual, these individuals, these entities and organizations that are made up of broken people are a part of my humanity. They're part of the humanity. They're part of the global humanity. And therefore, as I'm seeking to right the wrong, because that's really what we're talking about when we are talking about justice, you're talking about righting the wrong. I recognize in righting the wrong that person who I am seeking to address and deal with is a member of my human family. How can they be part of my family? They don't act like me. They're certainly not from my mindset. But folks, again, in the King legacy, Dr. King's philosophy of nonviolence and his methodology of nonviolence was steeped in understanding that even your adversary, your enemy, and your opponent deserves to be treated with dignity and respect in the process of dealing with the evil and the wrongdoing. Because in nonviolence, you don't seek to destroy and defeat the person. You seek to destroy the evil and the evil doing, because even if you get rid of the person, you still have to deal with the presence of the injustice and the wrongdoing and the evil. Have we ever sat back and thought about this? That's why I wanted you to listen to that word, think, that my father went on these quests constantly of thinking critically. And I'm afraid in today's climate, because of us being in an entertainment culture, we've almost gotten to a place where reasoning and thinking has gone out. And certainly critical thinking. We really have to think about how do we create a true sense of community in the midst of such diversity and where there is evil and injustice. We have to ask those deep-seated questions like, how did this get like this? That's why I invited you to visit that museum, because many people think that slavery was an act that occurred then, and so why are we making it a big deal? Because slavery is over today, but the reality is the thing that was driving slavery is very much present today in many of our systems and our structures. And if we don't push the envelope to ask these critical questions when we get ready to address things, we will just discard people because we are operating from the wrong context and frame of reference. We have to operate from this place called unconditional love, recognizing that I can't just do justice, get it right, make sure that that individual who's done the wrong pays for their behavior, but I have to show some compassion because they are a part of humanity, so I have to even love them. What really is love if all you love are people who love you? That's human love. We, in our humanity, have been created in the image and after the likeness of God. We have the capacity to think and reason at higher levels. We're not animals, although sometimes when I look at the behavior today, it seems like we are going in that direction of operating merely from our animalistic instincts. We are creatures of higher conscience. We can reason. We can ask deep questions. That's why I like that this lecture series is 2 floors down. It takes you from the surface further down to the core. And that's what we got to do right now. We got to dig deep into these conflicts and to this division and this polarization, because we're in danger of adding to it if we're not careful. And so justice requires, establishing justice requires that we operate from this higher framework, which love is, because it's a divine thing. There's a spark of the divine in each one of us if we just tap into it. To be able to see that other person as even a victim of their own behavior, their own ignorance, their own upbringing and socialization. But it takes us understanding that that person we're looking at today didn't just end up there on their own accord. We're actually all responsible. That's why we have to own what's happening in this world. Each and every one of us. We can't look at it as that's their problem, that's their responsibility, I have nothing to do with it. No, we all have to participate, because as Daddy said, if we're going to correct everything that stands against love, that means looking in our own mirror to see if there's something within my heart, within my soul, that is also standing in the way of justice. Because hate only begets hate, violence only begets violence. And many times when things happen, the first response is to become incensed. And there's a lot of stuff right now to be incensed about. And it didn't just happen when Trump got in the White House. I want to remind us of that. Because for some reason, people finally woke up when Trump got in the White House and realized what many of us have known for a long time. America has to deal with its deep roots of supremacy and privilege. It's not just race, it's class, it's all kind of stuff. We got to deal with it. And because it's been gripping some people for so long in certain communities, it's easy to be angry and frustrated. But you have to guard your heart. Because one of the things that can happen in the work of social justice is that you become incensed first. And if you're not careful in guarding your heart, that incense can turn to a sense of bitterness. And that bitterness can turn to a place where you begin to respond and react out of that kind of emotion. And instead of bringing some good out of the situation, you add more problems. And so there's a lot that we can learn from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He was an exception, but he was an ordinary man. He was an ordinary man who turned his negatives into a positive. He was not born with any kind of spoon in his mouth. Even if he came from a middle-class family back then, it didn't matter if you were black. Because all black people were viewed the same way. He faced hate and hostility and discrimination. And he had to deal with segregation. He said one time he was dangerously close to hating all white people after he came back from an oratory contest that he won in South Georgia. And while they were riding back and they stopped to a town, a white passenger got on and he had to relinquish his seat. And he was upset about that. But instead of letting the seed of hatred take root in his heart, he began to use his mind and start thinking, how can I correct these things that stand against justice? And how do I do it so that I'm not doing it out of the same spirit and heart and attitude and mind as the people who are doing it to me? And in the end, as he continued to grow and develop and ended up thrust into this movement, where he had already studied many philosophers and many theologians and developed this whole philosophy and methodology of nonviolence, he came to an understanding that everybody is a victim in this thing. Some people are just victims of their own mentality. And if we're going to correct, that means discarding is not correcting. That's a temporary solution to a much deeper problem. So we got to think about, how do we structure the corrective action? Think about this. I'm nearsighted.